Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another fabulous, fun-filled, fantastically edutainment Friday Ramblings. So, this week, I thought we would dip into the video game realm, because we haven't really touched that much in recent episodes, while at the same time providing a little preview of a counterpoint to one of my previous episodes that gave the impression, and I've certainly, not opposed to it. I've kind of dropped shorthands here of it and other streams and whatnot products of that I am not the biggest fan of reboots, remakes, revivals of dead licenses, kind of thing. I'm sorry, but as a creative person, I believe that, well, there's nothing wrong with a sense of nostalgia and replaying old games. I think when it comes to new product should be new product, and we should not be sacrificing the joy of experimenting with new product to go with a safe fan base pre-built in rehashing of an already existing game. However, there are exceptions, and of course, when I say game, I'm focusing on that for this week, but technically that same rule applies to any form of entertainment media. But there are a few exceptions to this. Certainly, if enough time has passed since the game came out, that even the audience that was around when it came out doesn't have very distinct memories of it because it has been that long, or your ideas for innovating it are actually all about getting into what made the original game good and adding more to it, or it's just such a massive reuse of the concept that it could be seen more as just a continuation of the franchise than an actual reboot of the original game. There's reasons why these things can work. First and foremost, though, being that attitude of we're not doing this for a quick, easy, guaranteed buck, but we are doing it for a genuine appreciation and love of the previous game. So, with that in mind, I'm going to highlight a company today that has multiple examples of reboot, remake, reviving done properly, as well as some original content of their own. And that is WayForward, aka officially, in legal sense, WayForward Technologies Incorporated. So, let me get here to my notes real quick. WayForward Technologies Incorporated is an American independent video game developer and publisher based in Valencia, California. Founded in 1990 by technology entrepreneur Voldy Way. Again, if that's not a perfect pronunciation of your name, I do apologize, sir. I've only seen it in print, so I have to make my best guess here. WayForward started by developing games for consoles such as the Super NES and Genesis, as well as TV games and PC educational software. And in 1997, they relaunched their video games arm, placing the company as a contractor for publishers and working on a variety of licensed assets, which is where things really get fun. So, real quick, we are going to cover the fact that WayForward Technologies, or just WayForward as I usually call them for short personally, and we'll do throughout the video for ease here, they do continue to make a variety of products using licensed assets. I'm going to go ahead and list a few of these off, covering their company's 30-odd year history. real quick before we dig into the meat of our discussion, just to give you a more thorough view of the company and how they are not putting all their eggs in the one basket, that is original content or the genre of games. Remake, remaster, reboot. So, they have worked on games featuring Mickey Mouse, Casper, The Land Before Time, Bear in the Big Blue House, Sabrina the Witch, specifically the animated series variant, Wendy the Good Witch, the WWF, The Scorpion King, Godzilla, Rescue Heroes, SpongeBob SquarePants, Barbie, the X-Men, Justice League, American Dragon, Jake Long, Looney Tunes, Shrek. Woo! Adaptation of Where the Wild Things Are, Batman, Thor, Aliens, Adventure Time, Smurfs, Regular Show, Transformers, Ninja Turtles. Hey, pretty much anything they can work on, anything that they can get working good. And the thing is, those games has a lot of what you're going to expect. Are going to be kind of hit and miss, just depending on your personal preference in games. But it does highlight the fact that they have worked on not just licensed titles, but a variety of licensed titles, going from obvious young children Nickelodeon shows up to stuff that all ages of gamers can get into, like Batman and Thor. So that's an important thing and a major point for WayForward, that when they do work with licensed properties, they do cast as wide a net as possible with those licensed properties. Now, real quick, before we get into the re-franchises, we're going to discuss their core original franchise. And the one that, well, again, unless you're really into licensed products, is the series you are most likely going to associate with WayForward. And that is our good friend, the half-genie hero herself, Shantae. For those of you who are not familiar with the Shantae series, I'm going to give you a quick overhaul. They are platform games, more often than not two-dimensional, sometimes that 2.5D. So even the more recent games do have a bit of a nostalgic feel. And feature the, as I said, main character of Shantae, who is a half-genie. Although, as her storyline progresses, that is not necessarily the entire case in all games, because the games do feature an ongoing progressive storyline. So, I will say, I'm going to get real quick into the list of the games and the years they came out, so you can get a sense of how often they produce Shantae games and how deep the franchise has gotten. But yes, I would recommend playing them in order, so that you can get a sense of the ongoing life of Shantae. But besides being a platformer, the games do have a few points where they try to distinguish from standard platforming tropes. Instead of doing something like a jumping on characters to kill them like your Mario Sonics, Shantae's main weapon is whipping her hair, which she keeps up in a woohoo ponytail. I don't quite have enough hair to do that. I got some decent length hair, but it's not quite Shantae ponytail length. You get the point, though. She uses her hair as a weapon. She also has the ability to perform dance moves, which are, by and large, especially in the early games, inspired by the various cultures' variants on what is commonly referred to as belly dancing, which works given that her character's outfit is very reminiscent of the iconic genie, big poofy pants, tube top look, popularized by our old friend Barbara Eden in the classic I Dream of Jeannie television series. So, for those of us who have seen that classic sitcom, hey, we get a little bit of a inspirational call out in her character design. Now, she does have her own ongoing antagonist rival that she occasionally gets along with to some extent in Risky Boots, a female pirate who is pretty much always looking for a way to elevate her reputation as the bad girl du jour of Shantae's world. Whether it's by acquiring treasure for riches or weapons to make her pirates the biggest, baddest brutes on the seas, you know Risky Boots is going to get in trouble. And cause trouble for Shantae specifically. So there's the basics. I'm not going to get into the plots of the specific games, as I do want to encourage you to check the games out yourself. I've not played all the games in the series. It is one of the many things that is on my to-do list. I have played for a couple, and I'm just going to keep working my way through the franchise because I keep enjoying the games. So real quick, let's break down the Shantae franchise, and then we'll move on to the main event of our rambling this week. Excuse me, I got an energetic kitty running around. So, 2002 brought us Shantae on the Game Boy Color. This would be, of course, the first game in the series, and the one that set the basics for the story, the world, the character dynamics. Make sure I don't overlook anything here. Alright. Next, in 2010. So yes, they waited 10 years while they worked on other stuff, mostly because the original Shantae was not a huge hit due to it coming out late in the Game Boy Color's life. These things happen. But the next game in the series was Shantae's, let me say one word at a time and this will come out easier. Shantae Risky's Revenge, which over the years has come out on the iOS, PlayStation 4, PC, and Wii U. Next up we have, in 2014, so only 4 years later, because Risky's Revenge did attract a little more attention as WayForward own reputation through the other games they're releasing had continued to build. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse, which is out on the Wii U, PlayStation 4, Xbox One, Nintendo 3DS, PC, and Nintendo Switch. And in 2016, only 2 years later, I know we're getting a little busier here, but it's all good because every Shantae game that's come out has built a bigger audience, and the developers have always had good ideas for these games and they always come out well, so we're going to forgive a 2-year gap. Shantae Half Genie Hero. See? That's where I got the reference from earlier. It all comes around. Half Genie Hero on the Wii U, PlayStation 4, PlayStation Vita, Xbox One, PC, and Nintendo Switch. Now, currently that is as far as the series goes, although it looks like... Oh, no. Excuse me, I am corrected. Misreading my release dates here. For the iOS, via the Apple Arcade feature, Shantae and the Seven Sirens did come out in September of 2019. And Microsoft Windows, which will of course incorporate the PlayStation 4, as well as PC, Nintendo Switch, and Xbox One will receive releases in the first half of 2020. So that game's kind of half out. So Shantae and the Seven Sirens brings us up to the latest game in the series. And as I've said, I have not played it or Half Genie Hero yet, but I have heard wonderful reviews about Half Genie Hero and look forward to getting to that as I work my way through my video game queue, which is still pretty thick. Sadly, I'm just not powering through games obsessively like I used to. It's what happens when you become an adult with a job, children. So sad. I can't spend 6 hours a day playing video games every day. Sad face. I mean, I really wish I could. I would honestly love to just be able to, like, block 2 weeks out of my life. You know, paid vacation leave and just burn through all these games that I own that I've never played. Go ahead and grab some, like Half Genie Hero and Seven Sirens, that I'm looking forward to and I've been anticipating being able to play. Not to mention, eventually replay a lot of these games that I've been looking forward to replaying, but I don't want to replay them until I play the ones I've never played before. It's just never ending. And honestly, this goes back to what I've said before in a previous video of why I do not stream video games out on current gen consoles or even current PC games. Well, simply my queue's gotten so thick over the last few years that it just takes me too long to burn through to get around to playing games for me to keep pace. So I just choose to go ahead and, for my Tuesday streams, stick to the classic retro games that I play for the streams. Yeah. Instead of giving people hopes that I'll play a game that just came out a week ago. Plus, there's plenty of other streamers to do that. So, But anyway, going on. I highly recommend you check out the Shantae series. The original Shantae game is available on the Nintendo eShop. At least the Wii U and 3DS version. I'm not sure about the Switch because I do not own a Switch. Going back to what we just said about current gen console games, that I just have I don't have time to play them. But yes, the older Shantae games are available. Actually, not as downloadable titles, so you don't have to sit there and pay a mint to try to get physical copies on eBay. Because yes, Shantae and the Game Boy Color, to get a physical copy is expensive as sin. I am playing an eShop copy because that's just the way it goes these days. So, moving on to the main event, the thing that inspired this whole discussion of WayForward, that they have done games that are remake, reboot, remaster, revivals, that are excellent, that are doing the concept right. And so do not instill in me dread and eye rolling. So let's cover some of these real quick. Hold on, as I said, I got to go through here. I want to make sure I do these in order. Got to consult my lists and my master notes here. Alright. Our first big example was in 2007, and that would be Contra 4 for the Nintendo DS. Now, this is not a straight necessary reboot. However, the Contra series had been laying low for a while before this game came out. It was the first original Contra game for a portable platform since the 1991 Game Boy game Operation C. And was designed, as the 4 in the name implies, to be a direct sequel to the Contra games for the NES and Super NES, although if you count Operation C, that was technically Contra 4, so this would make DS Contra 5, but Operation C was kind of a spin-off game as well, so, you know. Also, it was released in time to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the original Contra coming out. So, you know, a little bit of, attention on some old stuff. Now, we move on a couple years later to 2009 when they released A Boy and His Blob for the Wii, PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Vita, Xbox One, PC, iOS, and Android. Now, I have played the Wii version of A Boy and His Blob, and I have to say, it was an excellent game. Like the original game for the NES and its sequel for the Game Boy, the new Boy and His Blob is primarily a puzzle game. There is a little bit of combat element, although it's more in nature of tricking the enemy into traps so you can cause him direct harm. That's how most of the boss fights work. Because, as I said, the game is primarily a puzzle game. For those of you who are unfamiliar with the Boy and His Blob series, the Blob is an alien who is seeking help from the boy, a random Earth child chosen by fate and destiny, where the Blob discovers the ability to shapeshift into various Earth-inspired shapes, such as jacks, as in, the thing that raises up the tire, ladders, trampolines, holes, bubbles, based on what flavored jelly bean that the boy feeds the Blob. So, this sets up the basics of the game. You run around, you reach an obstacle, you figure out what particular item the Blob needs to turn into to get past the obstacle, feed the Blob the jelly bean. In wonderfully animated, incredibly cute transformation sequences, the Blob transforms, you get past the obstacle, keep moving forward. Now, as I said, the game is essentially a remake of the NES Classic, but it expands upon the NES Classic in so many ways, in that it's got individual levels within multiple worlds, and it's just, as I said, for those of us who remember when a lot of early games were minimal enemy fighting, maximum explore and investigate and puzzle through obstacle type style gameplay, it's a wonderful nostalgic feel. And for those who didn't grow up that long ago, again, it's a nice low violence variant on your typical platform exploration games. For those who kind of want a slower paced, more chill way of beating a game. Except for, as I said, some of those boss fights where, being boss fights, there is a little more tension, a little more timing. Still not nearly the kind of thing you're going to get in a lot of modern, action-style games. Move forward, do a few licensed games, do another Shantae. We have Centipede Infestation, which came out on the Nintendo 3DS and the Wii. I know, we're sensing a theme. They do a lot with Nintendo. But what can you say? I guess Nintendo likes WayForward style. Now, Centipede Infestation is, of course, based on the original Centipede game. I've played this one as well. I own it. Still own it to this day. I did purchase Boy and His Blob, but the only downside with games of that nature, like a Boy and His Blob, is, at least for me personally, once you beat the various levels, there's not a lot of replay value, so I did trade in a Boy and His Blob. But I did keep Centipede Infestation, and I've beaten the game. It takes its inspiration from the original, very much 2D Centipede arcade game from the 80s. And just turns it into more of a level-based action game, where now you are, instead of just this odd little shape that shoots something from somewhere at a giant monster centipede and its occasional buggy allies, you are distinctly a human in a kind of post-apocalyptic world, trying to both save the few existing natural gardens that exist, as well as help spread a few new ones by fighting off the giant mutant insect army that would wreck shop on the plants if they were allowed to, with the aforementioned centipede being the biggest, baddest bug on the block. Now, it is a massive switch up in presentation and playstyle from the original arcade game, but it works in this case because, I mean, again, Centipede was, from one of the original eras of arcade gaming. And yes, it was ported to a variety of home consoles, but that's kind of the point, is if you're going to go back to the Centipede franchise concept, you pretty much should just rebuild from scratch. Now, the game does have a few unlockables in the sense of you have two characters to play from. They gain a couple different gun-based fire. Well, I guess proper term would be firearm, but a few variants on their firearm weaponry and a few different outfits. So, there is a bit of a completionist challenge to the game besides simply beating the story mode. And I gotta say again, if you want a game that's got a reasonable difficulty level, and just allows you to run around and shoot big ugly mutant bug creatures, it is a way to go. And it is highly enjoyable to play. It, unfortunately, as I said, it did come out in 2011. Yes, again, sorry, got to consult my notes, make sure I get my information straight. And there was just so many other good games coming out in 2011, it kind of fell between the cracks. So, jump a year later, and we have, for the Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, and PC, not a Nintendo release? Hey, it happens. Double Dragon Neon. Now, Double Dragon Neon is not just a return to the classic Double Dragon franchise, but done in a wonderfully tongue-in-cheek way. Because Double Dragon originated in the 80s, they decided to give the game a very, very 80s feel to it. It does not go for the nostalgia retro graphics. No. It's got modern, good-looking graphics. Not, excuse me, a little hair in the eye there. We're not talking massive 4K graphics. But it's done more in a like comic book sketch graphic style, which works wonderfully for the genre, which is the arcade style beat 'em up. But it's very 80s pop culture thick, and it feels like a nostalgic game, even though it only came out a few years ago. Not just because it's a revival of a classic franchise, but because they went for that vintage 80s atmosphere. Which, as I said, is brilliant because for a game where you're running around beating up gangs of people, building in a little bit of sense of humor and giving you a second to chuckle a bit at what's going on does help lighten the mood of what is, really kind of a very serious thing. It's like you are beating up every person with a opposing moral alignment, not just in your own city, but in a few other towns as well. So, that can be something very serious, dreary, and bleak. Luckily, WayForward is there with a wonderful, light-hearted touch to make it all work. And it is wonderful. I do confess I have not beaten the game because sadly I am not the greatest in the world at arcade beat-em-ups. I enjoy playing them, but I never mastered them. Maybe one day. But I do own the game on PC. It is one of those games that every so often I will just pop it back up and try a couple levels. And I always enjoy it. So, that brings us to 1 year later. This is the big one, folks. Released on the Wii U, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PC, iOS, Android, and Windows Phone. Based off the classic 8-bit game initially created by Capcom, WayForward Technologies brings you DuckTales Remastered. Blatantly throwing the words in there, but they get away with it. Because, again, this is something I talked about earlier, where they took the original game, took the original levels, gave it a graphical overhaul in all the right ways. It still looks like a Saturday morning cartoon, which it should, because that's what it was inspired by. It's just looks more like the actual cartoon on TV and not a blocky 8-bit representation of a Saturday morning cartoon. They added in voice acting and in fact brought back as many of the surviving cast members as they could. In fact, that's actually the point why I use that term surviving is, from what my research has shown me, the only cast members that were not brought back from the original DuckTales cartoon of my youth were ones that were sadly no longer with us, and so recasting was a necessity. Now, the game does add 2 more levels that were not present in the original. A intro level that is incredibly easy and basically serves as a tutorial for those people who never played the original game or haven't played it in so long they were not immediately familiar with the mechanics, as well as adding a new final level that is played upon completion of all the other levels. Now, like the aforementioned Centipede Infestation, DuckTales does have a lot of replay completionist challenging to it, as there are a variety of art and music galleries that can be purchased with the money you collect over the course of playing any individual level. Thus, you are going to, if you want to 100% the game, replay the levels over and over and over again. And frankly, even though I'm not big on 100%ing, and while I have not technically done it yet for this game, I don't mind. Because, like Double Dragon Neon I mentioned earlier, this is one of those games, for the record, I have it on the Wii U, where it's just every so often, especially if I only have a few minutes, it's the end of the night after I've got home from work, I'll just boot it up, play one level, get my money, buy the couple things in the gallery I can afford at that point, and that's it. Like, it's fun to replay the levels. All the joy of the original game is still in there. It looks and sounds more like the original source material, which is always a positive. That is what remastering should be. Not, let's make it as pretty as possible, let's make it look like a big Hollywood blockbuster, but let's make it look like what the original programmers wish they could have made it look and sound like when they made the first version of the game. That's never anything I can fault. That's never anything any reasonable person can fault. Those who have played the original DuckTales game in the NES, if you play DuckTales Remastered, you will, get that sense of deja vu that you're looking for. You will get that sense of, oh my god, this is just like the other game, but it's just the next level of the other game. It's what I never knew I wanted the original game to be, because the original game was so incredible to play. This is just more polished. And that's not an insult to the original Capcom programmers, because the fact is, DuckTales was famous for being, one of the best licensed adaptation games that was ever put out on home consoles. Everybody I knew that played DuckTales on the NES loved it. It was one of the all-time great Capcom success stories, especially for one that didn't launch a huge franchise with a dozen games. Yeah, we all know Mega Man and Street Fighter, but how can you not? They never stopped making those games. But DuckTales, they made one sequel for the NES for 2 games total, and then they called it quits. Now we have the remaster, which is awesome. So, moving on, because we have a little bit more to do. I think. Let me see. Yes. Yes. One more on here, which is a wonderful little thing. I've not personally played it, but again, it is something that has gotten rave reviews from everybody who read it, and that is River City Girls. Excuse me, not read it, played it. The reviews I read from the people who played it, get the right words in the mouth and then put them to the audience. But yes, River City Girls is pretty much a great game. I really haven't found any reviews from people that don't think it's a really fun game. Now, it is a spin-off sequel of sorts to the original River City Ransom. In this one, they have essentially flipped the script, as the name implies, with River City Girls, where your protagonists are now the girlfriends of the characters from the original River City Ransom, who are themselves kidnapped and in need of rescuing. And so, the River City Girls go forth, beat up criminals in their city, level up, power up, and save the day. Now, there are further unlockable characters, there are hidden collectibles. The main thing that makes this game great is, much like Double Dragon Neon from previous years, they took the approach of, since this is a classic game, let's give it a fun, lighthearted style that pays great respect to the classic mechanics, preserves those classic mechanics, and just adds a little bit of frosting to that cake. Now, again, confession time, I have not yet played River City Girls, but, you know, when you have pretty much every trusted reviewer that you know will give an honest opinion and not just blindly praise or blindly hate a game based on the who's writing the paycheck given to them, tells you River City Girls is a great game and you should play it, I'm going to trust them. And I'll admit, it is on my list of games that if I ever burn through my existing queue, I'm gonna pick up and give it a shot. So go on, do some research on the game, look at some gameplay footage. It's brilliant. It looks like just everything you could want from modern arcade beat 'em up that has roots in the glory heyday of the genre, and is willing to both embrace those roots and bring things up to modern times without any disrespect, without any shade being thrown. So, how do we sum this up? It's very simple. Between the Shantae games, a few of the licensed adaptation games, and a handful of remake, remaster, reboot games that have always done the whole point of going back to a pre-dug well right, WayForward has earned my respect as creators, my loyalty as a gamer, and as such, won the greatest prize there is in the entertainment business. And that is, pretty much all they have to do is look at me and say, "Hey man, we did this thing. You might want to check it out." Which thing? Like new Shantae game? No, not this year. But we kind of put some new polish on something old school and awesome. Really? Sweet. You got some screenshots? Oh, we got your screenshots, buddy. Alright, let's dance. That's the hardest thing for any entertainment company to do. Whether it's movies, TVs, games, books, comics. To hit so many home runs, especially in a field where that's getting so flooded by everybody trying to take advantage of current fads and trends, that you pretty much guarantee folks are going to look forward to whatever your next project is. I mean, I gotta be honest. They're always gonna have my attention. If WayForward sits there and says, "Hey, we're gonna do a remaster of this old game. You remember it? It was on the Super Nintendo." I'll be like, "Dude, I'm in." I may not spend the money on opening day, but I will totally be checking out gameplay footage. I am already hype. So, with that in mind, I hope I've hyped you up enough to make you want to come back next Friday because, hey, we discussed everything there is to say about WayForward and why they're a video game company that is doing so much right that I really have no major criticisms for them. You know, there's not much I can say on a constructive criticism front except maybe. Maybe try to scout out some bigger staff so you can bring this awesomeness out a little more often. I mean, I don't want you guys flooding the market either, but I'm just saying, once every couple years, we could probably open it up to one a year. Yeah. So, to my listeners, if you are a gamer, check out the Shantae series. Check out some of these classic revivals and remasters, especially DuckTales Remastered. That is just, like, hands down the... I mean, in that subgenre of games, that is one of the all-time great success stories. As somebody who played the original game back in the day when it was new, I mean, it's just everything I could ever ask for from a remaster. So, have fun, take care of yourselves, be back here in 7 days, because every Friday I'm going to ramble, and I assure you it's going to be worth hearing, because we don't bring the hate, we're never late, and that's why the ramblings are always going to be great. Bye-bye.